Who were Tartarians? The official history is hiding a major world power which existed as late as the 19th century. Tartary was a country with its own flag, its own government and its own place on the map. Its territory covered most of the modem world we know today, yet somehow it was ever so quietly incorporated into Russia, and some other countries. Sometime in the 18th century Tartary Muscovite was the biggest country in the world covering over 3,050,000 square miles. Tartary appears to have been one county, then split up into areas like Petite Tartary, Eastern Tartary, Russian Tartary, Muscovite Tartary, Chinese Tartary, Mongol Tartary. According to the 1979 Webster's Dictionary, there's no such place as Tartary or Tartaria, unless we accept the word Tartarus, which according to Webster is described as being a place in Hades reserved for the worst of offenders. Webster had to admit that tartar sauce was a thing, and also defines the word Tartar as a native or inhabitant of Tartary, but then adds a person of ill or violent temper, and one that proves to be unexpectedly formidable as alternative definitions. Once it gets to tartar on teeth causing decay, it becomes clear that there was deliberate intent to remove Tartary from all his story. In Greek mythology, Tartarus is the deep abyss that is used as a dungeon of torment and suffering for the wicked and as the prison for the Titans. There were well-established giants throughout the Tartary territory. The Tartarians are thought to have been breatharians, a being who does not rely on the digestion and burning of calories from food, water, but instead rather receives energy straight from the ether, much how plants get food for energy. The ether is thought to be the very fabric of the spacetime continuum that some would associate with electrons, the wind, the Holy Spirit, the atmosphere, and the gases in the atmosphere such as oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen. Since Tartarians quite possibly had a completely altered digestion system than the one we now have, they had no need for toilets in their bathrooms. Additionally, there were no sewer systems or waste treatment plants found. Were they able to make their bodies so efficient, there was no waste created? The Tartarians were masters of masonry, brickwork, steampunk-style technology, universally free energy, and grand architecture. Their Roman and Gothic-style architecture can still be found in the current guise as water ducts, city halls, banks, water stations, cathedrals, churches, hospitals and similar public and city works-type buildings. Their buildings were structurally sound and many are still in excellent condition today. And where did they grow their food? Not found, with no gardens present in many of the castles with little access to farmland. Tartaria, originally pronounced Tartaria, without the first R, is the name of the pre-Mongolian empire that originated in northern Asia before spanning the entire northern hemisphere. Great Tartaria was the largest empire during its time and would have still been the largest empire today. The denotation of lost souls spending eternity in Tartarus, the underworld, is due to the Tartarian Empire having been buried and wiped out during the liquefaction mud flood events, earthquakes, volcanoes and weather manipulation using directed energy devices, to bury her story, along with eliminating the moon calendar and replacing it with the Roman Catholic Sun Gregorian calendar in 1582. The world of the Tartarians is literally the world under our world. The Tartarians were the indigenous people, quite possibly founded by Noah's sons, making up the world-renowned Tartarian Empire. Amongst the Tartarians were tall people, averaging some 8 to 12 feet in height. They would have been considered giants to our current average height of only around 6 feet. However, back then the height of 10 feet was the average. Like the civilizations before them whose heights averaged 12 feet, 50 feet, 2+ miles, etc., each preceding civilization had an average taller height than the civilizations coming after them, and each succeeding civilization had an average shorter height than the civilizations predating them. Statures are diminishing after each deluge and with each new astrological age we enter. Moscow Tartary was conquered by the Romanovs in the middle of the 19th century. Samarkand, the capital of the independent Tartary, was seized by the Romanovs' army in 1868. According to the maps of the 18th century, the border of Moscow Tartary was very close to Moscow. Such a dangerous proximity greatly concerned the Romanovs. It is possible that it was the reason for Peter the Great to make the decision to relocate the capital further away in St. Petersburg to the swampy coasts of the Gulf of Finland. Here the new capital of the New World Order was built, St. Petersburg. This location was convenient for the Romanovs. The capital was far away from the Hordean Tartary known as the Great Horde, and the subsequent term, hoarding, meaning to take more than you need, which was completely against the Tartary mantra of, just give back more than you take. In the case of an invasion from the Siberian American horde, it would be easier to flee to the west from St. Petersburg than from Moscow. Only having defeated Pugachev, the Romanovs got an opportunity to exile the convicts further, to cold Siberia. And even further, to the Far East, to the coast of the Pacific Ocean, to Sakhalin Island. Moscow Tartary spanned the Urals, Siberia, Central Asia, the Far East, Alaska and North America. The conflict between Moscow Tartary and Romanov Russia, originally small in size, ended in the second half of the 18th century with the famous, allegedly, peasant, war against Pugachevs. The Romanovs succeeded in agreeing peace separately with Turkey and defeating the Great Tartary. Only after this the European emigrants who had settled on the Atlantic seaboard of North America, ventured west, inland over the continent. For decades they seized the North American territories of Moscow Tartary left without any governmental authority. Today this has been beautifully, but incorrectly narrated on in the Hollywood movies about, the very noble, white frontiersmen and the, very bad, Indians. In fact, the Native Americans were Mongolian descendants of Tartary. From Wikipedia Pugachev's Rebellion, also called the Peasants' War 1773–75 or Cossack Rebellion, of 1773–75 was the principal revolt in a series of popular rebellions that took place in the Russian Empire after Catherine II seized power in 1762. The history of war against Pugachev, as it is known today, is a pure invention of the victors, the Romanovs. Pugachev's rebellion was a brutal war between the Romanov Russia and the Siberian American Russian state. This kingdom retained the old Russian horde customs and had its own czar with his capital in Tobolsk. The Siberian czar was hostile towards the Roma not-Novembers, considering them illegitimate rulers of the western part of Russia. The Romanovs strived to possess Siberian Muscovy at all costs. They understood very well that the Russian people on the whole didn't support them and many would rather prefer the regime of Tobolsk to the Romanov St. Petersburg. That is why the Romanovs turned the very existence of their Siberian neighbor into a national secret. To preserve this secret, the infamous secret police was created, where the executioners tortured and hanged those who knew too much. As a result, in 1776, straight after the defeat of Pugachev, the United States of America emerged on May 1776, where Freemason Adam Weishaupt established their territorial claims. The Romanovs went about voraciously rewriting her story and slicing up the vast territories of Moscow Tartary, including Russia, Ural, Siberia, the Far East. In America, Alaska, Washington and Oregon were ceded to the Romanovs in 1819 and the rest of North America, to the USA. Up until now, the native Russian population of America is being persistently forced to forget their language and their past. Reclaiming their past on August 30, 1990, Tatarstan announced its sovereignty with the declaration on the state sovereignty of the Tatar Soviet Socialist Republic, and in 1992 Tatarstan held a referendum on the new constitution. 24 and 62% of those who took part voted in favor of the constitution. In the 1992 Tatarstan constitution, Tatarstan is defined as a sovereign state. Tatar became a name for populations of the former Golden Horde in Europe, such as those of the former Kazan, Crimean, Astrakhan, Kassam, and Siberian Khanates. The form Tartar has its origins in either Latin or French, coming to Western European languages from Turkish and the Persian language, Tatar, mounted messenger. From the beginning, the extra R was present in the Western forms, and according to the Oxford English Dictionary this was most likely due to an association with Tartarus. The Persian word is first recorded in the 13th century in reference to the hordes of Genghis Khan and is of unknown origin, said to be ultimately from Tata, a name of the Mongols for themselves. The Arabic word for Tatars is J. The Chinese term for Tatars was Dada, especially after the end of the Yuan period, 14th century, but also recorded as a term for Mongolian-speaking peoples of the northern steppes during the Tang period, 8th century. The name Tatars was used as an alternative term for the Shuai, a nomadic confederation to which these Tatar people belonged. All Turkic peoples living within the Russian Empire were named Tatar, as a Russian exonym. Some of these populations still use Tatar as a self-designation, others do not. Note how many cities were named Moscow in the USA in the early 1800s: Volga Tatars, Astrakhan Tatars, Lipka Tatars, Crimean Tatars. Dagestan Tatars who lived in the mountains. Nogai Tatars includes the Karagash subgroup of Nogayas, Kundrov Tatars. Siberian Tatars, Altai Tatars, including the Tubular or Chernivo Tatars. Chulims or Chulim Tatars, Yenisei Tatars, also Abakan Tatars or Achin Tatars, still use the Tatar designation. Kuznetsk Tatars and the Azerbaijani people. Caucasus Tatars, also Transcaucasia Tatars or Azerbaijan Tatars. The name Tatar is also an endonym to a number of peoples of Siberia and Russian Far East, namely the Caucasus people. Tartary had its own language, flag, crest, its own emperor, and of course its own people universal language, Tartary. A vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bounded by Siberia on the north and west. This is called Great Tartary. The Tatars who lie south of Muscovy and Siberia, are those of Astrakhan, Circassia, and Dagestan, situated north not west of the Caspian Sea. The Kalmuk Tatars, who lie between Siberia and the Caspian Sea. The Uzbek Tatars and Moguls, who lie north of Persia and India. And lastly, those of Tibet, who lie northwest of China. Encyclopaedia Britannica, Vol. Ill, Edinburgh, 1771, page 887. Now compare to the description given by Wikipedia. Tartary, Latin. Tartaria, or Great Tartary, Latin. Tartaria Magna, was a name used from the Middle Ages until the 20th century to designate the great tract of northern and central Asia stretching from the Caspian Sea and the Ural Mountains to the Pacific Ocean, settled mostly by Turco-Mongol peoples after the Mongol invasion and the subsequent Turkic migrations. Greek mythology Tartarus is both a deity and a place in the underworld. In ancient Orphic sources and in the mystery schools, Tartarus is also the unbounded first existing entity from which the light and the cosmos are born. In the Greek poet Hesiod's Theogony, c. 700 BC, Tartarus was the third of the primordial deities, following after Chaos and Gaia, Earth, and preceding Eros, and was the father, by Gaia, of the monster Typhon. According to Hyginus, Tartarus was the offspring of Ether and Gaia. Roman mythology, Tartarus is the place where sinners are sent. Virgil describes it in the Aeneid as a gigantic place, surrounded by the flaming river Phlegethon and triple walls to prevent sinners from escaping from it. It is guarded by a hydra with 50 black gaping jaws, which sits at a screeching gate protected by columns of solid adamantine, a substance akin to diamond, so hard that nothing will cut through it. Inside, there is a castle with wide walls, and a tall iron turret. Tisiphone, one of the Erinyes who represents revenge, stands guard sleepless at the top of this turret lashing a whip. There is a pit inside which is said to extend down into the earth twice as far as the distance from the lands of the living to Olympus. At the bottom of this pit lie the Titans, the twin sons of Alois, and many other sinners. Still more sinners are contained inside Tartarus, with punishments like those of Greek myth. Let us take the matter of history which along with religion, language and literature constitute the core of a people's cultural heritage. Here again the communists have interfered in a shameless manner. For example, on 9 August 1944 the Central Committee of the Communist Party, sitting in Moscow, issued a directive ordering the party Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartarian to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten, let us be frank, as to be falsified, in order to eliminate references to Great Russian aggressions and to hide the facts of the real course of Tartar-Ruelan relations, and this was no isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, historians, on orders of the Communist Party, have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians appear always in a good light. Needless to say, Histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed, so that the present and future generations of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the true facts of their nation's past.